You stayed silent, but what happened in her mind will shock you. Old Stoic wisdom. He who angers you conquers you. Elizabeth Kenny. You didn't walk away to wound her, nor did you go silent to manipulate. You simply recognized that inner peace is worth more than clinging to what no longer aligns with your spirit. No dramatic speeches, no ultimatums, just stillness, chosen deliberately. But here's what many men don't expect. Your silence often says more than your words ever could. And while you were seeking clarity, she began confronting confusion, followed by regret, then reflection. In this video, we'll explore what truly unfolds in a woman's mind when a man decides to step back with strength and stoicism, not to punish, but to preserve self-respect. What does she feel? Why does the absence speak so loudly? And what ancient lessons can we draw from Stoic philosophy to navigate modern relationships with dignity and depth? Let's get into it. 1. The moment she noticed you weren't reacting. The moment she noticed you weren't reacting, that's when the story really began. She was ready for the usual script, the long texts dripping with emotion, the late-night calls, the endless just checking in messages. She expected the chase. Instead, she got silent, and not the kind laced with passive aggression or bitterness. No, this was different. This was the calm of a man who tapped into something deeper. This was old Stoic wisdom in real time. No flinching, no frenzy, just stillness. And in that stillness, something rare happened. Her mind started racing. Because a man with an iron mind doesn't play the same emotional games. He doesn't flail when the connection cracks. He centers himself, he observes, he accepts. You didn't react because you weren't ruled by reaction. You weren't trying to win. You weren't trying to make her feel bad. You were simply embodying one of the core Stoic principles: don't chase chaos. Command your inner world. Don't mistake your silence for surrender. It was a signal, a quiet but powerful declaration of self-respect. That kind of composure is confusing to someone used to drama as a language of affection. She wanted to see if she still mattered, if she still had the power to make you move. But when you didn't, when your name didn't light up her screen, when her status view count didn't include you, she didn't feel victorious. She felt something else, something that crept up slowly. It was the absence of a man she once thought would always be there. And that absence spoke volumes. When a man trained in old Stoic wisdom steps back, it's not out of spite, it's because he's already accepted what is. That's not cold, that's clarity. You didn't explain, you didn't argue, you didn't perform, you just were. And that, my friend, shook her more than any speech ever could. She checked her phone again. Still nothing. She skimmed through stories, searched your profile, hungry for a sign that your iron mind had cracked. But all she found was more silence. And suddenly, that silence had weight. It wasn't empty anymore. It echoed every time you showed up, stood by her, kept your word. It reminded her of the comfort she assumed, the loyalty she never quite appreciated. You weren't being stubborn. You were being sovereign. You weren't punishing her. You were preserving yourself. That's what men rooted in Stoic principles do. They don't lash out. They don't plead. They don't lose themselves just to soothe someone else's unrest. You didn't need to flinch to show strength. You didn't need to prove your worth. You knew it. That's the thing when a man walks in quiet strength. It unsettles those who depend on noise to feel alive. Be that man. Be the one who chooses dignity over drama, clarity over chaos, and stillness over storms. Don't let emotional turbulence shake your foundation. Let your old Stoic wisdom guide you. Let your iron mind be your compass. And remember this, your silence didn't confuse her because it meant nothing. It rattled her because it meant everything. 2. She expected resistance, not restraint. She braced for the blowback. The texts, the confrontation, the emotional tug-of-war. She thought you'd cling, plead, negotiate. She expected resistance because that's what most men do when they feel something slipping away. But not you. You didn't cling. You didn't crack. You did something far rarer. You released. Not with resentment, not in a storm of blame, but with still, unshakable clarity. That, my friend, is power. That is practical stoicism in its highest form. You followed the old wisdom, be indifferent to what you cannot control. And while others confuse that with not caring, you knew the truth. Detachment isn't absence of emotion, it's mastery of it. She didn't expect that, not one bit. She was prepared for the fight, for the resistance that would reassure her she still mattered, that her presence still stirred urgency in you. Most people expect that. Resistance is a mirror, it reflects their worth back to them. But when you didn't give her that, when you didn't show up with dramatic speeches or watery eyes, it sent a message, not of apathy, but of strength. Your restraint screamed louder than any argument ever could. And that silence, it wasn't empty. It was loaded, packed with discipline, calm, and a profound sense of acceptance. You weren't punishing her. You were simply walking the Stoic rules forged not in reaction, but in principle. She searched for something to push against, a reason to argue, a thread to pull, but you didn't leave any loose ends. You gave her nothing but space, and in that space, her thoughts began to swirl, her mind started to race. Why didn't he fight? Why didn't he try to fix it? And slowly, the truth started sinking in. You didn't lose her. You let her go. There's a difference, and she could feel it. Don't mistake this for passivity. Don't let anyone tell you that stillness means surrender. What you showed was restraint, not weakness. Real control isn't about dominance. It's about discipline. You didn't flinch. You didn't need to justify, to plead, to perform. That's what practical stoicism looks like. It's not in loud words. It's in quiet convictions. You didn't need to prove your value because your behavior was already a reflection of it. And now, every time she tells herself, he moved on too fast, she's forced to confront the sting of it. Because it wasn't fast. It was final. And it was earned. You didn't perform healing. You lived it. You didn't announce growth with a megaphone. You carried it in your posture, your silence, your calm exit. That's the kind of growth that leaves a mark. That's the embodiment of Stoic rules, acting in accordance with your values, not your emotions. You must understand. This doesn't make you heartless. It makes you wise. It takes courage to let go without anger. It takes an iron mind to walk away without theatrics. And when she sits in the echo of your silence, she'll come to realize the man she thought would crumble didn't. He stood tall. He stood still. And in that stillness, he became unforgettable. If this message spoke to you, hit the like button, share it with a brother who needs to hear this, and don't forget to subscribe for more Stoic-driven insights. Comment to remember, my silence is strength. Drop that in the comments to affirm your discipline, your growth, and your iron mind. Let the world know you choose old Stoic wisdom over chaos, and that you no longer resist what you cannot control, you master it. 3. Her confidence turned into curiosity. You said nothing, but everything changed. You didn't beg, you didn't chase, you didn't crumble. She thought she had you figured out, assumed you'd break under pressure, assumed your silence was weakness. She was wrong, because when you chose silence, when you withheld your energy, your validation, your emotional investment, you flipped the script. That wasn't avoidance. That was discipline. You took control, not of her, but of yourself. That's what Epictetus meant when he said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." You stopped reacting. You stepped off the emotional battlefield. And suddenly, the power shifted. She expected the old version of you, the man ruled by impulse, desperate to mend things, chasing validation. But you didn't show up. That man is gone. In his place, a man walking the paths of wisdom, a man who chooses stillness over drama, a man who understands that real strength isn't in reacting. It's in restraint. Your silence wasn't absence, it was presence, powerful, grounded, stoic. And that's what rattled her. Because when you stop playing the emotional games, when you go quiet, detached, focused, you become a mystery, and a mystery is powerful. A mystery wins. Understand this stoicism isn't about cold detachment. It's about strategic presence. It's about becoming a man who doesn't flinch, doesn't explain, doesn't overextend, a man who builds self-respect through silence. You must understand your stillness is not weakness. It's control. It's mastery. It's how men win. It's how they dominate life on their terms. The modern world will tell you to text her, chase her, fix it. Don't chase chaos. Choose the stillness. Choose discipline. Choose to be the man who walks away when peace is disrupted. Choose the paths of wisdom. Let her wonder. Let her question. That discomfort, that confusion. That's her meeting herself for the first time. Your silence made her face her own emptiness. And that's the power of stoic restraint. You became the mirror. And mirrors don't talk, they reflect. You are no longer trying to be understood. You are the understanding. You embody Epictetus's call to win through discipline, through clarity, through control. When you stay silent, when you hold the line, you teach her, without saying a word, that you will not be manipulated, you will not be summoned, and you will not betray your principles for comfort. That is stoicism. That is strength. That is how you win. Modern life tries to pull you into chaos, into noise, into reaction. But don't fall for it. Let others chase. Let others beg. You remain composed, purposeful, silent. That's how a man builds mystery. That's how a man becomes legend. This is your edge in the modern world. This is how you win with stoicism. No pleading, no proving, no performance. Just the calm, still presence of a man who's walked through fire and decided not to explain himself. Let that be you. Choose the higher road. Choose the paths of wisdom. And when she realizes she's lost access to your energy, your presence, your attention, she'll know she lost a man who mastered himself. That is how stoic men win. That is how you win, over and over again, with silence, with purpose, with unshakable strength. 4. She tried to distract herself, but failed. She tried everything to drown it out. The late nights, the fake laughs, the endless scroll through curated lives on social media. All of it was her armor, flimsy as it was. She clung to chaos like it was comfort, hoping movement could muffle the ache. But chaos can't heal. It only distracts. She wasn't fine. She just looked fine. And the louder she lived, the more obvious it became. She was avoiding the only thing that could actually change her. Silence. Because silence isn't emptiness. It's weight. It's presence in disguise. It's the iron mind echoing back the truth she's been dodging. And your silence, wasn't an absence. It was a message. It was old Stoic wisdom in its purest form. No begging, no bait, just presence through absence. A stillness so sharp it sliced through the noise of her pretending. You didn't rage, you didn't explain, you simply walked, deliberate, clear, and calm. That's what Stoic principles teach. Hold your line. Don't chase, don't flinch, be the mountain, not the storm. She expected sparks. Instead, you gave her still water. And that reflection, it forced her to sit with herself. No stories to spin, no text to interpret, no drama to dramatize. Just the raw truth of who she was without your light. And that's where the shock hit, because it wasn't you who was hollow. It was the noise, the parties, the selfies, the meaningless chatter. It all rang empty when measured against the weight of your silence. That's old Stoic wisdom. Don't react. Don't explain. Be so clear in your boundary that they feel it even in the quiet. And the more you said nothing, the more she heard everything. Days passed. You didn't reach out, not to punish, not to prove a point, but because the iron mind knows when to stop knocking on locked doors. You didn't vanish from pettiness. You disappeared from strength. That's the thing about Stoic principles. They don't shout. They don't chase closure. They embody it. She told herself you'd break, that you'd miss her, or cave, or maybe just offer one last breadcrumb. But you gave her nothing, and in that nothing, you gave her everything she needed to finally sit in her own mess. That silence, it wasn't cold. It was pure fire. It was the wisdom of ages telling her growth doesn't come from noise. It comes from stillness. And the deeper lesson, the one that burned beneath all her distractions. She didn't lose you to another woman. She lost you to clarity, to a man who remembered who he was, a man rooted in Stoic principles, a man who'd cultivated an iron mind. Don't chase, don't explain. Be the mountain, be the silence that roars, be the lesson that lingers long after the noise fades. That's the legacy of old Stoic wisdom. And brother, she hears it now, loud and clear. If this message hit home, like, share, and subscribe for more timeless Stoic wisdom. Drop a comment below to strengthen your mindset and support the brotherhood. Let's flood the comments with power. Comment to remember. My silence is strength. I choose peace over chaos. Let that be your affirmation today. Your silence isn't weakness. It's power. It's control. It's victory. It's 5. The regret crept in, but pride held it back. At first, she wore confidence like armor, told herself you were just another guy, a passing presence, nothing too hard to shake off. I needed space, she said. I'm fine, she insisted. But pride is a clever liar. And silence, your silence, has a way of breaking through even the most well-rehearsed stories, because as time stretched and your name stayed absent from her phone, her heart began whispering what her ego refused to admit. She didn't just miss the texts or the routine. She missed the presence, the anchor, the man who didn't turn her chaos into a mirror of his own, the man who stood still while her emotions raged. That calm wasn't emptiness. It was depth, discipline, practical stoicism in motion. Then came the whispering thoughts, the quiet echoes she tried to ignore. Was I too quick to walk away? Did I misread him? Was his silence not neglect, but strength? And suddenly, the Stoic rules she never understood began to make sense. You didn't retreat out of weakness. You stood back because you knew your worth. You didn't argue to be seen. You walked away because dignity walks alone. You didn't chase, and that's exactly what made her start questioning why she ever expected you to. But pride, oh, pride is a stubborn gatekeeper. It doesn't open easily, even when regret starts banging on the door. So she stalled, sat in the shadows of what used to be, clung to the idea that she was still in control, that her choice was solid, but deep down, something else started to simmer. A slow, creeping realization that maybe, just maybe, she let go of something rare, something real, a man who didn't need noise to prove his value, a man who didn't try to convince her to stay, a man whose strength wasn't in the volume of his voice, but in the weight of his restraint. You must understand this. Your silence was a sword, sharp, intentional, and while she may not have shown it, it cut deep, not because it was cruel, but because it reflected back her own impulsiveness. That's the hidden beauty of practical stoicism. It doesn't yell, it reveals. Don't be fooled by her calm exterior, that pride she's clutching. It's armor over a wound she hasn't fully admitted, because to accept your strength would mean confronting her own weakness. To call your stillness strength would mean admitting she didn't see it before. And for someone used to drama, that kind of quiet power is deeply unsettling. So don't chase, don't explain, don't dilute your strength for someone still learning how to recognize it. Be the man who lives by the Stoic rules, not just quotes them. Be the one who walks away not to punish, but to preserve peace. Because eventually, when the noise fades and the silence settles, she'll see what she lost and wonder why she didn't see it sooner. And you'll still be standing, steady, strong, silent, but unforgettable. 6. She wondered, is he hurting or healing? You stayed silent, and that silence, it shook her to the core. She waited for a sign. Tears, emotional outbursts, maybe a cryptic message thrown into the void, but you gave her nothing. No performance, no cries for attention, just calm, just presence. You chose the ancient path, the paths of wisdom taught by Epictetus, forged in the fire of old Stoic wisdom. You didn't crumble, you didn't beg, you didn't plead. Instead, you chose discipline, you chose self-respect, you chose to win the inner war. That right there is stoicism, and it terrified her. Your stillness screamed louder than any argument. Your silence echoed louder than any confession. Because now she's unsure. Is he hurting Or has he healed? That uncertainty breaks her. If you're hurting, she has power. If you're healed, she has none. And the truth is, you took the pain and turned it into fuel. You turned the fall into flight. That is what Epictetus meant when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." You didn't react to the loss with weakness. You responded with strength, with dignity, with control. And that's the Stoicism win. Don't explain. Don't justify. Let your silence be your statement. Let your evolution be your answer. In modern life, where men are constantly expected to perform emotionally, silence is now your rebellion. It is your fortress. You must remember, people fear what they can no longer read, what they can't control. That unreadable version of you, it's powerful. It's unsettling. And that's good, because real growth doesn't need an audience. Real healing doesn't ask for permission. You walked the ancient paths of wisdom without fanfare. And in doing so, you became more than a man trying to get over something. You became a man in command of himself. He who is brave is free, said Seneca. Be brave enough to endure without display. Be strong enough to remain silent while the world demands drama. Let your stillness become your sword. Let your peace be your proof. Don't chase validation. Don't perform your pain. Don't announce your healing. Win in silence. That is the Stoicism win. That is how you master life. That is how you rise. Let every action be decisive. Let every word be earned. Don't broadcast weakness. Project composure. Let them wonder. Let them regret. Let them question what you've become. Because that mystery, that silence, that unreadable strength is victory. This is your warpath. This is your power. Stand tall. Stay still. Choose the ancient fire of discipline. Embrace the paths of wisdom. Speak only when it's time to say something that shakes the world. Until then, move in silence. Win in silence. Live like Epictetus taught, calm, powerful, and unshaken. Let that be your legacy. Let that be your answer. If you've reached this point, understand this: your power is in your silence, your rise, your mystery. Most men collapse under heartbreak, but not you. You didn't fall. You rose. Now I own it. Comment to remember: I rise in silence. I heal in power. Let that be your declaration. Comment it below and remind yourself and the world who you are becoming. 7. She replayed the last words, then noticed yours were missing. She read the last few words again, over and over, and then it hit her. Yours were gone, missing, vanished like smoke. Not a whisper of anger, no long, bruised goodbye, no desperate speech about how you deserve better. You didn't flinch, you didn't crumble, you didn't perform, you just left, quietly, entirely, completely. And that silence, that clean withdrawal, shouted louder than any explosion. It unsettled her. Why? Because it was pure iron mind, because it dripped with old Stoic wisdom. You didn't plead to stay in her memory. You didn't need to. Now she can't stop thinking about you, not because you forced your value on her, but because you refused to bargain with your dignity. You lived the line from Epictetus. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. And that's exactly what you did. No spectacle, no self-pity, just a man who chose to walk away with the weight of Stoic principles anchoring every step. That's the paradox. A man who doesn't chase becomes the one who's chased. A man who says nothing leaves echoes. Be that man. Don't give people the satisfaction of watching your downfall. Don't hand them your chaos like a souvenir. When you're met with disrespect, indifference, or betrayal, don't explain. Don't justify. Don't react. Withdraw. Not to punish them, but to protect your peace. Let the silence do what noise never could. That's not a weakness. That's an iron mind. That's power, wrapped in restraint. She'll check the messages again. She'll wonder where it all went. She'll scroll through old memories, hoping to decode a goodbye that never came. Because deep down, she expected the usual. She expected blame, rage, desperation. But what she got was a mirror, and in it, her reflection stared back with unanswered questions. Your absence becomes her consequence. your stillness becomes her unrest. That is the gravity of a man who moves with old Stoic wisdom. You must remember, people hear noise every day, but silence hits the soul. A man anchored in Stoic principles doesn't argue his worth. He doesn't need closure from someone who never offered clarity. He closes the door with his own 2 hands and walks away, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. And when he leaves, the space he occupied becomes a vacuum, one that others feel long after he's gone. That is the mark of a man who has mastered the ancient art of walking away without flinching. Be the presence that lingers, not the drama that fades. Old Stoic wisdom doesn't scream, it doesn't chase, it endures. And in the end, it's remembered, not because it demanded attention, but because it refused to beg for it. 8. She started watching, without reaching. You stayed silent, but not out of weakness. It was power. It was composure. And that silence, it spoke louder than begging ever could. She's watching now. Story views, quiet likes, checking your profile, not out of habit, not by chance. She's studying you from a distance because your discipline unsettled her. You didn't chase. You didn't collapse into emotional chaos. You chose the harder path, the path of stillness, the paths of wisdom, and that is what Stoicism teaches. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." You didn't react. You responded, with strength, with silence, with sovereignty over your emotions. Most men lose themselves when a woman pulls away. They overshare, overpost, over-apologize. They abandon themselves to win her back. But Stoicism says otherwise. You must win, not through noise, but through presence. You must win, not by proving your worth, but by living it. She notices now, because your absence is a statement, and that statement echoes, "I'm not yours to toy with." That's the power of detachment. That's the power of a man who walks the paths of wisdom. You must understand this control over your attention is control over your life. When you stop feeding her validation, she's left starving. Why? Because before, you gave her everything. Your gaze, your time, your energy. Now, she gets none of it. And that silence. It's not cold. It's controlled. That is the Stoic win. When she asks herself, does he still care? That's not your concern. Let her wonder. Let her spiral. That is the effect of disciplined masculinity. It is not about punishing her. It is about honouring yourself. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free," and you chose freedom the moment you refused to beg, when you withheld reaction, when you stopped performing. Now you walk with poise, with calm, with strength. That is your victory. That is your edge. She once held your attention like a weapon. Now you've reclaimed it like a sword. Don't give it away again. Don't explain. Don't chase. Don't fold. Let her feel what she tried to make you feel, confused, unsure, unseen. But while she's confused, you must remain clear. Let her questions multiply. Let her silence become torment. You, on the other hand, must walk forward. You must live. You must rise. You must embody the ancient force of Stoicism in modern life. This world tests your emotions daily: women, money, distractions, ego. But you must anchor yourself in reason, in restraint, in power. The paths of wisdom are not easy, but they make men out of boys. Epictetus would say, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Be the master. Be the mystery. Be the man who doesn't flinch. While she watches, you win. While she wonders, you rise. That is how you win with Stoicism. That is how you reclaim your edge. That is how you become unforgettable, not because you were loud, but because you were unshakable. Let your silence speak, let your absence thunder, and never forget, you are the storm. 9. From missing you to missing her own stability. It started with missing you, but it didn't stop there. Soon, she began missing something deeper, her own stability. The calm she felt in your presence wasn't just emotional, it was physiological. You weren't merely the man she dated. You were the grounding wire in her chaotic world. You were the still point in her spinning compass. That calm presence that wasn't luck or charm. That was practical stoicism. That was a man living by stoic rules, a man who didn't need to fix her storm because he had already mastered his own. And when you pulled that quiet, centered energy back, the contrast was jarring. The noise returned. So did the doubt. Her mind, once at peace beside you, became a battlefield again. At first, she didn't notice it. That's how it always starts. She assumed she was fine, but her nervous system knew better. The late-night spiral of thoughts crept back in. The distractions, endless scrolling, shallow conversations, empty likes, stopped working. Her dopamine faded, but the anxiety didn't. That's when she began to feel it. The silence where your presence used to be. The peace you provided wasn't loud. It didn't beg for attention. But now that it's gone, the void is deafening. That is the power of a man who has mastered stoic rules. That is what practical stoicism feels like in a room. It doesn't dominate. It stabilizes. You gave her more than companionship. You gave her safety without smothering, attention without performance, presence without pressure. When she scrolls through her feed now, the highlight reels feel fake. The noise feels like noise again. Because when she was with you, she wasn't escaping her reality. She was living it. And not because you entertained her, but because you didn't flinch. You didn't overreact. You listened deeply. You responded, not out of emotion, but from intention. You didn't try to control her. You controlled yourself. And that gave her a sense of freedom she didn't know she needed. But freedom isn't free. It's earned. And when it's taken away, it stings. Now she realizes what she took for granted. It wasn't the dinners, the laughter, or the late-night talks. It was the iron mind you brought into the room. It was how your calm gave her permission to slow down. It was how your restraint gave her a mirror, showing her what it felt like to be seen, truly seen, by someone who didn't need to fix her, but simply stood firm. That's the mark of a man who lives by practical stoicism. He doesn't chase storms. He becomes the lighthouse. You must understand this. Your stillness was never a weakness. It was power, refined. And now, in your absence, that power echoes. She can't replicate it. Not with likes, not with loudness, not with someone new. Because stoic rules aren't about charm or performance. They're about consistency, depth, discipline, and those can't be faked. Be proud of what you brought. Don't regret the silence. Don't rush to fill the space. Let the space speak for you. Because a man anchored in practical stoicism doesn't just change the mood. He changes the memory. And some memories they haunt, not because they hurt, but because they healed. And now they're gone. 10. She thought you'd wait, but you outgrew the need. You stayed silent, but not because you were lost, confused, or heartbroken. You stayed silent because you evolved. She thought you'd wait. She assumed you'd linger in the shadows, checking her profile, hoping for a flicker of interest, a breadcrumb of attention. But you didn't. You outgrew the need. You didn't wait to prove a point. You didn't disappear out of spite. You grew. That is what men on the paths of wisdom do. You stopped orbiting her. You reclaimed your center. You didn't chase closure. You became it. You turned pain into power. You didn't crumble. You conquered. You didn't post quotes about heartbreak. You lived the ancient strength of stoicism. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. You chose action over anguish, discipline over distraction. You trained your body, not for revenge, but for respect. You built silently. You moved forward without ceremony. That is strength. That is mastery. That is what it means to win. Don't give your power away by waiting. Don't seek validation from someone who left you behind. Don't let time be a prison. Make it your forge. Let silence be your roar. In a world addicted to noise, your discipline becomes legendary. In a culture obsessed with attention, your restraint becomes your sword. That's the difference between boys craving affection and men walking the paths of wisdom. You didn't need to be seen. You needed to build. You didn't need her to notice. You needed to rise. She imagined you paused, stagnant, hoping. But Stoicism teaches, Never cling to what you cannot control. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Said Epictetus, you stopped waiting for a door to reopen. You built a new one, brick by brick, habit by habit, day by day. You win because you didn't crumble. You win because you didn't retreat. You win because you mastered your emotions and forged yourself in the fire. She expected weakness. You gave her silence. She expected desperation. You delivered strength. She expected you to chase. You climbed. You grew so far beyond what she remembered that even if she looked back, she wouldn't recognize you. That is victory. That is transformation. That is the Stoicism win. So stay grounded. Stay sharp. Stay focused. Life is not about proving your worth to someone who walked away. It's about proving to yourself that you were always more than enough. Let that silence echo with strength. Let your discipline speak. Let your growth be undeniable. Don't wait. Don't explain. Don't fall back. Instead, build, lead, dominate. This is your time. This is your code. This is the path of wisdom. Walk it like a man. Walk it like Epictetus taught. Strong, free, untouchable. That is how you win. 11. Now she wonders if she was ever truly seen by you. You stayed silent, and that silence thundered louder than any words you could have spoken. At first, she waited. She expected the familiar script, the call, the message, the apology, the chase. But none of it came. You chose the path of silence, and in doing so, you followed one of the oldest paths of wisdom, what the Stoics mastered centuries ago. You let go. You didn't chase validation. You didn't kneel before uncertainty. You didn't try to force clarity from confusion. You didn't beg for love that had already begun to drift. Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And your reaction, steady, stoic, resolute. You didn't react with desperation. You responded with discipline. That silence made her reflect. That silence broke her assumptions. That silence, your silence was your power. Because silence, when chosen with strength, is not the absence of voice. It is the presence of control. And now she's left with the real questions. Did he ever really need me? Did he ever truly see me? Was I ever more than just a space filler in a life I didn't understand? And those questions, those are the consequences of your decision to follow Stoicism and win through stillness, through presence, through poise. Men, listen. This is not about bitterness. This is about mastery. This is about walking the paths of wisdom laid down by the strongest men in history. This is Epictetus reminding you freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. You didn't control her thoughts, her choices, or her perception. You controlled yourself, and that is the real win. That is the moment when you stop being a seeker of approval and become a guardian of peace. In a world full of noise, your silence becomes your sword. Your boundaries become your shield. Don't let the world tell you that strength is loud, reactive, or dramatic. Strength is choosing not to respond. It's watching chaos unfold and refusing to step into it. That is the power of Stoicism. That is how men win. Not with force, but with focus. Not with fear, but with fortitude. Let this moment be your turning point. Let it remind you that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. You didn't need to explain yourself. You didn't need to prove your worth. You already knew it. And when a man knows his worth, he doesn't chase. He aligns. He moves forward. He walks the paths of wisdom with unshakable confidence. He lets go of what was never his to hold, and in doing so, he rises. Don't chase what doubts you. Don't beg for what confuses you. Don't cling to what drains you. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to understand yourself, to stand tall, to be unmoved. Stoicism wins. And if she saw you clearly, she would have known that silence wasn't your absence. It was your final answer. Now, move forward with power. Speak less, meaning more. Let your life be louder than your words. Master yourself. Walk the path. Win through stillness. Win through stoicism, win with honor. Thanks for watching, my friend. If this message struck a chord, it's probably because you've lived it. The quiet strength, the unspoken dignity. Remember, you don't need to explain your piece to anyone. That calm silence, it wasn't a weakness. It was self-respect in action. So here's my advice. You don't always have to win the argument. Sometimes, the real power is walking away, not because you gave up, but because you've grown. Let them misunderstand you. Your silence says more than shouting ever could. If you've ever been that person, the one who became closure instead of chasing it, type it in the comments. I don't chase closure. I become it. Until next time, stay grounded, stay clear, and most of all, stay true to yourself. Take care.